in terms of transparency at Bondora, Go and Grow having a switch now, obviously the question, how many assets does Bondora manage at the moment within the Go and Grow product?
So first of all, Bondora doesn't manage assets, so we're not a fund, nor Go and Grow is a fund. So given, this is not a fund nor a deposit product, then we have a number of regulatory rules that apply to our marketing and communication, which in essence state that whatever we do and communicate, we cannot in any way portray the products as if they're like a fund or as if they're a deposit product. And we do a lot of work to make sure we don't, break those sort of guidelines, because, and that is something that in some parts forces us to be more round with words than we can actually, in an ideal situation be. So when it comes to detailed numbers about, okay, what is the total amount of money invested, exactly by investors and etc., then, there's no Go and Grow fund as such, right? There's no Go and Grow balance sheet that we manage. And therefore, given we're not a fund, we cannot actually imply and state and publish numbers that would, somehow portray Bondora differently than the actual product is.
I'm not sure how you go against certain regulatory laws by pointing out the assets you have under management from the company. I mean, there's Estonian platforms as well in the peer-to-peer space. Let's name Income Marketplace, that also publicly share the development of their assets they have under management. So how does it differ for Bondora having the same jurisdiction?
So when you look at the data we publish, then everything we publish under the sort of like criminal loan book and the overview we provide is everything we can actually publish, right? So we don't know what are the exact jurisdictions or rules that other competitors are following, but we have quite strict rules internally defined based on the laws we know apply to us and the laws that we are destined not to sort of in any way kind of break, that set and define how we communicate about Go and Grow and what we communicate about that. It's also the words we use and etc. So it's quite technical. I cannot comment what are the things that other lenders follow, because it depends on what discussions they've had with their regulators and everything around that.
So once again, just to confirm, it's not an internal policy; it's external rules.
So
apply by the. But you're not regulated by an Estonian entity, are you? So aside from your lender in Estonia.
So basically, in order not to fall under, the constructs, given Go and Grow is not a fund, Go and Grow is not a guaranteed deposit, then you have a lot of rules that are coming from those regulations that basically define, what wording you can use, what communication you can use if you're, that or that type of entity. Which means that if you're not, right, then you need to make sure that you're not using any communication that would imply for a retail customer that this is now a fund product or this is now a deposit product. We've done a lot of surveys among our customer base and have ensured that, all our customers understand that this is not a fund product and this is not a guaranteed deposit and the capital is at risk, meaning that whilst we've been able to deliver 6.75% return for the last 6 years, and we have very strong internal sort of mechanisms and stress testing and forecasting in place that allow us to sort of predict, 10 years into the future and adjust our policies, today to the level that is necessary to ensure that we can deliver the target return also 10 years into the future, then we cannot in any case imply that the return is guaranteed. We cannot in any way seemingly imply that it's somehow to do with a deposit product or any other regulated product. So, as you said, so that the kind of the positioning and the setup of Go and Grow gives us certain, limits as such, right? That we need to follow. And, in that sense, they're internally defined, within compliance to make sure that we don't, have problems when it comes to sort of like, you know, any rules on advertising of securities, deposits, and other regulated funds. So it's quite complex, you know, set of rules. I don't know if and what rules are applied to the different platforms that you're kind of like mentioning, and how much they have actually looked into this. But we've been in this business now for, you know, since 2008, right? We've had a lot of conversations with different regulators across all of Europe and also beyond. And, you know, it's quite, let's say, hard, you know, and hard work to maintain a strong understanding of what you need to do in order to sort of like really operate. And as you get bigger, then those rules get tougher. You know, as a very small startup, then, you know, people don't maybe really care. But being in this business for that long of time, and we've had a lot of those conversations, and there's a lot of rules that we need to comply with, right?
Okay.
It also applies, for example, in our consumer lending businesses, that a number of the things that we today have to follow are things that are applied to banks, and rules that weren't applied to us, you know, maybe 2016 or 17. So there's two trends, you know, right now in Europe. First of all, regulations are getting stricter on anything related to financial services. And second part is that, you know, more and more of the rules that, you know, in some cases used to be applied only to banks are now applied to sort of non-banks as well.
I'm just personally confused why this would be, you know, I don't know the specific rules that, or the compliance that applies in this case that would prevent you from stating those numbers publicly. But even then, I would just boldly assume the way you have disclaimers for interest or the interest is not guaranteed for going grow. The return is not returned. Yeah, exactly. Thanks. The return is not guaranteed, or capital is at risk. You know, that why wouldn't you just put in a disclaimer saying this is the assets we manage at the moment within this product, with a disclaimer, we hereby, you know, acknowledge this is not a fund actually that we're having. This is just for transparency purpose for our investor base to have a better understanding about, you know, the product, and then ultimately also the risk profile of the product. So that would be my logic.
Look, I mean, you know, all the things we today publish are based on, you know, what we've gotten back from our customers, that, you know, the information at the level of granularity that's needed. At the same time, the loan data tape is 100% public, right? So anyone who has a lot of deep interest into these actually can get like quite granular data from there. So I think we've kind of like covered it in both sides, and right now we have not seen a need to sort of like adjust. You know, I think the strong data tape is there to support any very detailed, you know, request without us having to sort of add anything on top to the day-to-day customer.
With the logic behind assets under management, is it the same one that applies for not publishing data on the current net return of the Go and Grow loan portfolio?
Yes, because Go and Grow, it applies to all of those levels basically, right? So Go and Grow, you know, net return is, so, you know, just to kind of talk about the design of Go and Grow again. So Go and Grow is designed so that, you know, all excess return, effectively over 6.75%, kind of is held back as reserves, right, to cushion continuously through times where, you know, as actually returns go up and down. So historically, we've been able to deliver 6.75% over the past 6 years. And what we do internally is that we, you know, as I mentioned before, we have different sort of risk management processes in place to forecast the future of those portfolios, you know, 10 years into the future. And then we see, okay, if and what do we need to change today in either pricing, risk levels, I don't know, recoveries, etc., in the operational business to ensure that Go and Grow return can be sustainable, right? Once again, we cannot say it's guaranteed, but it can be sustainable, you know, throughout the term. So whilst we cannot state that the return is guaranteed in any way, then internally we're doing everything, you know, humanly and technically possible to ensure that, not only in the 6 years past up until now, but also into the, long future we have ahead of us, we're able to deliver that. There's a lot of investment going into that, but the sort of like technical disclosures around these things we're not going to make about exactly how we do it on a daily level, and everything that goes into sort of the on the inputs. So it applies on the also to sort of like in terms of like liquidity, for example, right? So when we look at sort of like liquidity inside of Go and Grow, then we use the principles applied in the industry to other similar institutions, right? And then based on these, we have designed the way how constantly we look at the liquidity inside Go and Grow, and given we've from already almost day one, I think, applied those principles, we've been able to deliver instant liquidity, although it's not guaranteed, in 70 months out of 74, which is our great achievement.
Well, let's stick to the return 1 second, because still on the, let's say, general statistics page on Bondora, we can see there's a net return pointed out with 6.4% at the moment. Is this all loans from
2009?
And this implies so the assets that went into Portfolio Pro, Portfolio Manager.
It implies everything, yeah.
It implies including Go and Grow.
It implies all loans. It implies all loans. So it implies all loans that we've issued ever throughout Go and Grow, not only from Go and Grow, but individual investments, APIs, Portfolio Manager, Portfolio Pro, every single country. It also implies, sort of like institutional investors that we used to work with who kind of buy specific blocks of loans. It's basically all loans.
All right. Obviously, then the question is, how sustainable do you think the return of 6.75% is when over the span of 16 years your general performance is below that mark?
So, as said, the return that's there is calculated over 16 years, right? And we started Bondora, Go and Grow 6 years ago, I think. And, a bulk of the activity in Go and Grow and investors have, basically, invested in the past years. So when we look at also when we started versus where we are now, then we have, by now have invested, into hundreds of thousands of loans that continuously allow us to fine-tune the credit models, fine-tune the way we price, to fine-tune our operations. So, as every day goes past, the higher, we can get the margin, on the loans that we issue. However, of course, when we talk about the margin, on each loan issued, then there's also the factor of, okay, what is competition doing, because you need to price the sort of loans from the consumer borrower's perspective as well competitively. But as we get better at understanding the risk levels and everything around that, we can always make sure that every loan we book has the necessary sort of like margin to deliver the 6.75% to investors. And I said, we feel quite confident, but we do a lot of work on risk management side on ensuring that we're able to do that sustainably 10 years into the future. Right? So we're not looking at like some short period of time, but we're actually simulating 10 years into the future on understanding, okay, if and what we need to do today, to ensure that the returns that we want to deliver to the Go and Grow customers are sustainable for that timeline.
Obviously, I see it a bit twisted because on one side, Bondora itself as a company seems very, let's say, financially stable, but at the same time, those indicators bring up or lead to a feeling of, okay, Bondora apparently has certain struggles if you look at the statistics when it comes to the performance of the loan portfolio. Seeing also having a lot of investors that had negative returns in the past, and then how to trust a product like Bondora Go and Grow, which in a nutshell is a black box, very hard to understand from the outside in terms of how many assets are actually underlying there. You sub-communicate a few numbers, hundred thousands of loans and here and there, but what is the actual return? How big is that liquidity buffer in the end? As you mentioned, is also something you can't properly comment on, to understand like when, at which point might investors run into the risk of partial payouts again, or because you're selling this product very much on liquidity, but not having an understanding about how the actual underlying assets are performing, makes it very difficult to understand for investors how much they can trust this product outside of just arguments. Okay, there's a long track record and you delivered reliable most of the times in the past. So how do you want to deal with this situation, or do you believe like many investors are not that concerned about it at all?
No, I mean, when we survey our customers, then almost everyone always comes back that they understand that their capital is at risk at Bondora. They don't look at this as like some kind of a guaranteed deposit. So when we look at what our investors understand, that yes, they understand there's risk involved with Bondora, right? So obviously, I'm not sure if they're concerned or not concerned, but they're diligent that there's investments risks associated, right? But the stable net return and the liquidity they've been able to access is a very strong value proposition compared to many other alternatives on the market, right? So now looking at if you say that okay, we've been able to deliver 6.4% annualized return over 16 years, then if you look at even traditional products also in terms of stocks and bonds, etc., then through that 5 crises, it's actually a very strong return. Now obviously when we look at Go and Grow today, then our target return is 6.75%, which means that we are constantly investing and have done so for many years now into risk management, into pricing, and into the sort of credit collections and all of those operations that are necessary to be able to deliver that return to investors, right? So, the loan portfolios today are diversified across many markets. Estonia and Finland, we've been operating for many years, and these make up the bulk. Netherlands is growing quite steadily, but as it's a new country, we're also sort of constantly every week basically looking at the risk indicators and adjusting for it. Latvia we just launched, but Latvia will scale up only next year, because once again we're gonna take it much more slowly than we did in the past, right? Because if we look at in the past, then when new markets came online, we kind of like scaled them much faster. Now we have a very kind of like slow growth profile there. So we have that part, plus we've invested now, I think the risk team is 30-40 people today that daily deal with all aspects of the sort of credit risk, from pricing the loans, from how we issue. I mean, I think you wanted to go through the process as well later on. So I've taken our sort of credit policy with me, how we issue the loans, how we price the loans, how we collect the loans, how we go to court. We have very strong today processes in each country in place. How do we take cases to court? So we've invested a lot of money, and we continue to invest a lot of money into credit risk management and pricing and everything related to that, to be able to deliver 6.75%. Of course, internally, in order to do that, we are aiming for much higher IRRs on the underlying loans to be able to deliver that, right? And those higher IRRs are not sort of that, the interest rates are higher, but actually the net return targets are higher, so that the risk buffer is strong enough. So I think the track record we have, plus, the principles and policies we have in place today, and also actually the data to support it, is a very strong foundation for, customers to believe that we're able to deliver on our promises. And I can just rest assured say that whilst we cannot guarantee, even the principle as such, then internally we're doing everything humanly and technically possible to not only guarantee, or not, I can't say guarantee, but not only to sort of ensure that we're able to sort of safeguard the principle, but we're there to safeguard the return as well. and all of our processes and policies and the sort of internal tools we built are designed to be able to do that looking 10 years into the future.